Perfect. We're rolling. Peter, thanks for taking the time, sir. I appreciate it.
No, my pleasure. Great to see you again, both, well, not in person, but at least see you. And yeah, this is good fun.
Absolutely. Yeah. Happy Canada Day.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah, it doesn't feel very celebratory around here right now, but we're slowly kind of crawling our way back to normal a little bit.
Right. Yeah. I have a feeling that this 4th of July is not going to be quite as celebrational. As
pretty muted. Yeah.
Yes. But I wanted you to know I busted out. I got a surprise for you. This is from really, really far back in the day.
Nice.
Yes.
Nice.
I think it might be one of the last ones that are still in existence.
It is, and that the gold with the gold emblazoned. That's a rarity. That's a high quality one too.
That's yes. For those out there that are listening, it's a Freestyle International T-shirt, which was the camp that Peter used to run back in the day when I was a young whippersnapper. You were my first coach, and quite accomplished in having to deal with me as an 8-year-old. But not only that, ski career, I mean, World Cup champion, and just super influential in the world of freestyle, not only around the world, but Canada, super influential. I mean, you were the CEO there for about a decade, and then you went to be the director of Winsport, right? Or
own the Podium, yeah.
Own the Podium,
so I oversaw all the winter sports for 4 years going into Korea, and we had our most successful winter games ever, both on the Olympic and Paralympic side. So that was good.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then I got to have a little bit of a hiatus and chase my oldest son around. He's a rower, so I got to chase him around for a bit of a summer and watch him at a World Championships and some World Cups and stuff, and then went back to freestyle about a year and a half ago. So it's been full circle.
Full circle, and you're back. You know, it's always funny with talking to people around freestyle here in the U.S. I certainly blame you for the monster that you've created over there. Obviously, you've had some talented athletes to go along the way to help that, but you really have quite the juggernaut that is Canadian freestyle these days.
Yeah, look, I think so much of success is about culture, and so much of culture is about managing your resources too. And culture is a pretty important piece of any successful organization. Doesn't matter whether it's business or sport or a team. And if you look at any kind of sport legacy or corporate legacy, there is a pretty significant element of culture that's somehow built in, bred in, factored in, and it I've been blessed in that. I think, as you said, we've had some phenomenal athletes. I mean, you don't make a guy like Kingsbury, he's obviously an anomaly in and of himself, but he's also kind of bought into the whole culture that we try and create, and certainly has helped to foster that as well.
Right. Now, how hard was it in creating that culture for you? Because obviously it's taken a little bit of time. You've been there a long time. I mean, what's the kind of work that goes into building those cultures? Because you hear that term a lot, and it's definitely not something that just happens overnight.
No, and the funny thing is culture is more driven by action than it is by words. Certainly words play an important part in terms of delivering messages. But it's the daily do's and the daily sees that make a big difference. So what people see, other people in the organization doing what they see you doing, right. and what they choose to do, and those are the kind of the backbones. And I think as well, accountability and work ethic are the two basic elements of culture across all things. And then it may shift based on what your nuance. If you're a sport, it may involve a particular commitment to a certain element inside the sport. If you're Apple, for example, it may be about kind of innovation, may be the next piece, but those two basic elements are always there regardless.
Right. Yeah, no, you definitely that accountability is key. One thing I'm kind of curious, going back, where does that drive start for you? Like what drove you? Because I mean, obviously you were extremely successful, not only as a skier, but then as a coach, and now running the whole association.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, it all comes down to passion. And, I've always, since, I started skiing at 10 years old, and I did my first flip when I was about 13. So I was a early adopter into the freestyle world. And I just love skiing. I love skiing, and I, first and foremost, and I obviously, love and have a wonderful, great affinity for freestyle and the people in it. And it really comes down to, that passion. And if for me, being able to wake up every day since I was a teenager and, kind of do what I loved, helped me be able to kind of stay energized through, almost 5 decades now of being engaged in this. So, it really is a lot about that. And, just loving the people, loving, the environment, loving what you do, and certainly first and foremost, loving the sport.
Right. What drove you to that passion? Where did you grow up? Where were you first skiing?
Yeah, I grew up in Calgary, and my home resort was Sunshine Village. I was very fortunate in that I got involved in teaching skiing. There wasn't a race program at the resort at the time, and so I got engaged in teaching skiing very young at 13, and was able to.
At 13?
Yeah, teaching. Wow. Yeah, and that really helped me a lot, because I got to be around some wonderful coaches, teachers that helped me at a very young age understand pedagogy, understand curriculum, understand how to relate to people and relate concepts to people, which I think, was a marvelous platform for coaching, once I got further down the road, another, kind of 7-8 years down the road. And then, that was, I think, really the basis for me being able to understand those communicative skills, to be able to convey concepts to people and be able to adapt terrain, and, all of the things that I think are really important in terms of teaching. And then teaching, the great coaches can teach as well. Right. And be able to move back and forth. And that's, going back to, Freestyle International, that was one of the greatest, what I loved so much about, being able to spend that month a year with kids like yourself at the time, but, and even adults that were eager to learn. But it was that when you have to go back and teach concepts, it really makes you think more about how you relate to people, and it makes you learn to attack from more directions than one. That one message that reaches one athlete won't reach another. So you have to find another way and another way and another way. And sometimes it's Socratic. So it makes you, I think, more aware. So from a coaching side, it makes you a far better coach, I think.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely, not all those athletes learn the same, right? I mean, I always have the term, you got to have more than one arrow in your quiver, especially when you're dealing with an athlete, because they don't respond the same way. It'd be a lot easier if they all do, but part of that is it's part of the fun, though, trying to figure out what's going to make it click.
Absolutely.
Like, okay, this jump, try this, or try to do this when you're going through, this turn or whatever else. I mean, it kind of makes you want to come back for more, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. The puzzle part of it is right. I think as an ADHD person, having that different stimulus all the time, it helps you to stay engaged and not be bored, and find, ways to satisfy your own internal hunger to grow and develop.
So moving in, like, as an athlete, that's such a young age to kind of start into coaching. How did that help when you started becoming a professional skier?
Yeah, look, I think, again, having to teach things to people, and my athletic career was largely, it was pretty much entirely without coaches. So I became the first national team coach after I retired in '84. So my entire, kind of World Cup career of 8 years was without, any coaching. We all worked together. So, I think me having the teaching background helped a lot, because I had to think in those terms of, okay, well, more critically about breaking skills down, and then being able to reconstruct them, and being able to detect and correct, even if it was only on myself or the people around me. And that was one of the great things about the camaraderie of that time period is the athletes all work together. I think it's a lot like the new school athletes of today, where they've kind of created this entity, and they've, largely at the cutting edge. So they've been self-taught, and now we're just seeing coaches start to be able to kind of catch up to where they're at and be able to actually help them move forward,
Right. I mean, how crazy is that looking back on it now, though? Because especially, I just feel like in our society today, like there's a 10-year-old that's playing baseball. He's got two coaching, he's got his throwing coach, he's got his batting coach, and really it's crazy to think that, especially back then at that level, right? You've kind of been through all of the this kind of revolution and evolution of the sport, right? From back in that day where you don't, no video cameras, and you're kind of going through, certainly no helmets when you're, going off the aerial jumps and everything else. That's pretty crazy to think about.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, and it's very interesting to reflect on, society and sport in that context. And, I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword. On one hand, you really, I think the technical acceleration of skill acquisition is paramount now that you have, that access to knowledge.
Right.
And so I think, we're seeing kids that are progressing, so fast through technical layers. And I think that's great. But I think a lot of the element of, being accountable to yourself, of having to, as we talked about earlier, solve the puzzle, figure stuff out yourself,
right.
Rather than necessarily have the answer, kind of given to you.
Yeah.
I think that's a bit of a loss,
Sure.
And I think there should still be time planned, or Socratic coaching sessions planned with athletes, so they don't lose that, because I think that's an important element of accountability. If you have to figure some stuff out on your own, then you're going to be, you have greater pride in what you accomplish, and B, I think it helps you understand the layering of it. But in a case where you're just handed the answer, a lot of times it can make you just follow blindly, and that's not always the best thing. And we've seen some of the great sports dilemmas that we have right now out there, with in terms of harassment and a lot of things that's unfortunately seeded in that I just blindly follow kind of mentality. So it's a double-edged sword. I think it's lifted sport immeasurably, but I also think in some ways it's lifted or kind of devalued human creativity. Definitely. And our ability to be, grow as individuals through sport.
I feel like it takes away some of the ownership. Like, as you talk about, like when you try to figure stuff out on your own a little bit more, and some of those things, it's interesting now, like if you have 10 athletes on a run or something, they come down and like, well, did you see that? How did it look? I was like, well, how, you're not automatically, I shouldn't have to give you feedback for every single run. You should be able to know the difference between one run and the next, and not need an automatic breakdown on coach's eye or on this. Like I feel like that needs to be embedded in, where it's, you spend 1 hour and I'm not giving you any feedback. You're just trying to figure it out on your own. Maybe I'll video a couple and we can talk about it after the day is done, or something along those lines, because it has really come to that. Every single run, every single jump, every single thing that you do is now broken down, video broken into a fraction of a second, or to really see that toe drive on a lay, or whatever it may be. That kind of takes away a little bit of just being able to get that your own feeling of it, right?
Oh,
like there's
absolutely.
so much feel in the sport, and that kind of gets sucked away when it's like, okay, you're supposed to do it like this, and you don't really build that feeling, right?
Yeah, and I think I really one of the great things I've seen in a lot of great coaches is they employ a Socratic method of working with people. Mm-hmm. So they're drawing the answer out of the person. They're making the person provide the answer, as opposed to spoon feeding them so there's a deeper level of understanding there, and a greater assimilation of, as you said, the feeling and the concept of what they're doing. So let alone, the person develops as a human being, because they're forced to actually think and process stuff. Mm-hmm. I think, we live in an era, unfortunately, where, there, in my mind, there's great coaches, and then there's coaches who depend greatly on curriculum, so A, B, C, D, E.
Right.
And they're not necessarily, don't have the art ability to kind of go A to B and then over to F and then back to, that moves that particular athlete in a certain way. And, it's one thing, and you see this in human relations. Detection is one thing. Anybody can tell you what you're doing wrong, right? Doesn't matter whether it's your spouse or your teacher or coach, right? It's one thing to tell you what you're doing wrong. Anybody can generally detect. Whether they can detect the right thing, that's another thing, but they can detect. Whether they can correct that detection is another phase. The greatest ones provide the correction without even providing the detection, because you don't need to know what you're doing wrong necessarily, right, unless you really need to break something down and have an understanding of that. But generally, you need to have an understanding of, what do I need to do to make it better? So right, it's more about, how did that feel? Okay, well, if you do that, what happens? And so you develop that, that feeling, or that positive shift to the correction, or to where you want them to go, by employing that Socratic piece and then driving them to that thing. In a lot of cases, you said, around the technical piece, it's drills. It's giving people drills that they can actually feel something. And then once they feel, the light switch goes on. It's like, holy shit. Okay, now I get it,
Yeah.
And it's all, as you said, having all those arrows in your quiver, all those tools in your toolbox, to be able to, okay, that one's not working for this one, so I got to try it that way. And this one's not working for that one. But it's about that positive correction, as opposed to necessarily all the negative detection, Right. And the same around the video thing too. Like, I can show you all day what you're doing wrong, but that doesn't help you, and so many coaches today over rely on those tools because they're insecure in delivering that, that the positive part about it themselves.
Right. Yeah. Well, there is that, I feel like, especially with a lot of the coaches these days, or just kind of in general, like business and things of that nature, there is that fear of being wrong. Right? Like, fear of just like, hey, this is what I think, and maybe it's not right, and I need to relearn and get corrected. Otherwise, because I definitely don't know everything when it comes to coaching a double full, or coaching, in that aspect. Same within the business world. Like, I don't know what the only way you're going to learn is if you ask, or, try to have that conversation with the athlete. Like, hey, how does this feel? Well, let's try this. Let's play with this. Maybe you need to drop that arm a little bit sooner, or think about getting on the downhill ski a little bit later. Or,
You're so right. And you've kind of nailed one of the really critical, concepts of great leadership and great, coaching, great whatever, is having that vulnerability. Right. And if you have that vulnerability, the right to be wrong, then all of a sudden you're more of a human being. You're not saying it's my way or the highway. I know everything. So then people will hear you more. They don't care what you know unless they know you care, right? That's the classic piece. And in that case, by admitting the vulnerability and, being able to go to a place where, you might be wrong, then you become more human, and then you become more approachable. You become, you have a much deeper connection to people, and to being able to help, kind of move the needle.
Right. No, definitely. It's one of those things that I think we could all, especially in the recent world of coaching in the freestyle world, it seems like everybody knows, at least in the US, everyone has the right answer. Everyone's way is right. No one can be wrong, which is kind of shocking.
Well, look, I think that's a very common, coaching malady. And, it's, you go and look at the greats, and they're the ones that really reach people at a deeply human level, and they can only do that if they have vulnerability.
No, definitely. So, as you're going in, you're running this whole organization, and what kind of helps you stay focused and kind of prioritize and get everything done, right? Because there could be a lot of things on your plate, and maybe you can't get to everything in one day. What are kind of some of those habits that you've built that allow you to kind of, take care of those vital priorities.
Yeah, yeah, and it's funny, I have a bit of a philosophy around some of that, and one of the key tenets of that philosophy is procrastination is a powerful tool.
Definitely.
And not everything that kind of jumps into your face, and there's a million things right in a day, is a 5-alarm fire. Mm-hmm. And what are the most important things that you need to do to move what is most important for you, your business, your athletes, your whatever it is, your product, move that forward. And if you stay focused on that, those key elements, some of those minutia things, they may be important and they might boil up to the surface, and then you can deal with them. But getting caught in the minutia of stuff, just bogs you down, and then you don't necessarily stay focused on the important things that really move the needle.
Yeah, no, it definitely.
And I think for us in sport, it's really been about I took a page out of one of the tenets of USSA's books in the early days, because they used to live by this. But the question was, is this the best thing for our athletes?
Right.
And if I can answer that question, yes.
Yeah.
Regardless, with every decision or every question, then I'm on track. But if it's has nothing to do with them, or if it has little to do with what our objective is, which is putting athletes on the podium, then I shouldn't be paying a lot of attention to it.
Yeah. No, it's definitely something that's super simple that I think we at least here definitely have lost lose sight of to a certain degree, for sure. Well, that's why you're the GOAT. That's why you're the GOAT, Peter.
I don't know. Yeah. Well, I have another philosophy about the GOAT. You can always be the GOAT or the GOAT, and you will. Yeah, in your career, you will be at some point, right?
Right. No. So, speaking to that a little bit, as you've kind of gone along on your journey, and a lot of things that people kind of don't like to talk about is some of those failures along the way, right? Yeah. Those failures that you kind of need to have that really help kind of fuel that success, and it's a great learning moment. But I feel like a lot of people don't really like to talk about some of those failures. And one that speaks out to me, I'm sure you don't really want to talk about it too much, is 98 Nagano, Jean-Luc fourth.
I love talking about that.
Yeah.
And this is, I'd rather hear people all day talk about their failures than about their successes. The world is full of people who, did this, made that, they were perfect, it was all good. I don't learn anything from that, or I learn very little from that. What I really learn from is like as you said, when people have those deepest failures that are, make them question their reality, or question, their direction, or question how their processes, or, motivation, or all of those things. It doesn't mean you won't return to those pieces, but it makes for a real, a great grounding, and a great reassessment of where you are and where you want to go. And Nagano, it was an unbelievable crush. We went into, we had the World Championships in Nagano in '97. We came away with 5 Olympic discipline medals in '97. We went into '98. We had exactly the same plan in terms of training camps before, in terms of transition. We had the athletes stop in Hawaii on the way over, have a couple of days to decompress, and then be able to kind of come in fresh. Every part of it was well planned and well executed. And we came away with 0 medals. And it was a ground shaking, kind of happening for not only for us, but I think for the freestyle world. I remember, one of the German commentators was, kind of espousing in German, like just almost screaming, like this doesn't happen. Like there's just no way that Canada doesn't win medals, But, I think coming out of that, it gave me kind of a few pretty serious reckonings. And one is that you don't control everything.
Right.
That, as much as you may plan, prepare, execute, evaluate, and, kind of process, there are certain things that transpire that you don't control. So, and the funny thing is that all of us who were involved in that time period, none of us can go back and put our finger on one thing or even a group of things that said, that's where we really went wrong.
Yeah.
But, on the other side of that, one of the things that, that I really did kind of put my finger on that helped me once I, kind of reincarnated as a CEO about 6 years later,
right,
was that this sounds a bit counterintuitive, but I needed to have a greater control over my environment. When I was head coach of the program, I was still beholden to a lot of parties above that directed or dictated a lot of the philosophy or a lot of the direction of the program.
Okay.
And as CEO, I was able to go in and really build it from scratch the way I knew it would function the best.
Right.
And from that, we were able to, I think, build a really good program coming from 204 to World Championships at 2011. I think we had 13 medals in Deer Valley at the World Championships there. So I 7 in Sochi, and so I think we built a program that had the right elements, and I think that was just because it was solely focused on performance, on excellence, and on accountability.
And so, where would you say that they lost sight of that in '98? Right, because I know that you didn't as a coach, right? You came in, you had the success the year before. You have what you think is the right plan that's going to get the results that you need, right? And then
I think if there's one thing, and I think pretty much any organization that's had kind of a long history of success, not by design and not by arrogance, but you can become a bit complacent.
Right.
And again, it's not by getting arrogant and just going, I don't need to do that. It's just you get a bit comfortable.
Sure.
And by having that comfort, maybe certain details weren't paid attention to the same way that you would have if you were a little bit harder, hungrier, meaner.
Right.
And so I think it's being a bit more staying hungry and being able to kind of turn over all those rocks and not let people be unaccountable, and make sure that they are driving themselves and they're not they're okay. They'll just when it comes time, they'll be able to pull it out, kind of thing.
Now, how difficult is that to kind of maintain? Because I know as certainly like as an athlete that I would say if it's easier as a coach to make sure you keep your athletes hungry, and obviously they're usually passionate about it and in it for the right thing, and same thing in many other aspects of business and everything else. When you're from the top, it's a little bit easier, but for you yourself and going through, I know I have my moments where some of that motivation, and it's not that you're not thinking about it. You know what your goals are, you know what you have in mind and what you want to accomplish, but there are those days that can turn into a week or so where you've kind of just hit this plateau and you are a little bit complacent. Like you think you have a good kind of game plan, but then you kind of start to, just start to go through the motions a little bit as you talk.
Yeah, look, I think there's a bit of a difference between, I think you're describing a highly motivated person that's become a bit stale.
Sure.
Which that's normal. Everybody's going to go through those flat periods, right?
Right.
But then there's the other side of that, which is I deserve. And you can see, where you see culture rot and where you see things really go from a highly performing organization to one that devolves into chaos, is when you have, that culture piece that was built on I will earn, to it starts to creep in this I deserve.
Okay.
And as soon as that I deserve, and it might only be one or two toxic elements that go, well, you know what? I'm part of this group. I may not have paid the same dues that those guys paid,
right?
But I'm part of this group and I deserve whatever they get, right? Well, no, you don't. You have to earn that.
Mm-hmm.
But when that mentality creeps in, then that complacency creeps in, and that has nothing to do with being stale. That has to just, you know, I don't have to earn this. I deserve it. It should just come to me, and that's all good. And we, you know, to be honest, I mean, we had a bit of that going on in our program when I came back, you know, in a little over a year and a half ago.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, I really had to kind of shake the tree a bit with our coaching staff and with, you know, with the athletes, and go, look, you know, we're drifting in this direction. This is not where we want to go. So we need to shift this. And I think, you know, we've had some great changes. We've still got a lot of work to do to get back to being, you know, hungry and hard and mean,
Right.
to be Mick, and, you know, in all disciplines. We've got some great athletes across all the disciplines, and just making sure that hunger stays deeply embedded in that everyday performance. If you can go to bed every day, it doesn't matter if you're stale. It doesn't matter if you had a shit workout. But if you can go to bed every day and say, I did everything I could do today to make myself a better athlete, you're all good.
Right.
You're all good.
You're at least you're moving in the right direction for sure.
Yeah.
What, I mean, so would that be some advice you kind of have for some people that are kind of struggling a little bit out there, or navigating, cutting their way through some of their own fears and things of that nature, when you're, you know, necessarily you're an entrepreneur, you're starting a new business, or you're a coach, or you're an athlete that's kind of, you know, not getting the results that they would like? I mean, is that kind of something you would offer up to them to get a good night of sleep and make sure you're busting your ass during the day and the results will come?
You know, and just stay to where your passion is, you know, like if you're always epicentered on your passion, you will always come from the right place.
Right.
And you will, you know, I think Steve Jobs said, you know, you have to have passion, because if you don't have passion, you won't have that, you know, that fuel to be able to get over those difficult times.
Right.
And, you know, again, if you see, you know, any of the greats out there, they've had some hardships. They've had to overcome some adversity. And the only thing that's got them through that adversity is their passion and their belief in kind of moving through that.
Yeah.
And adaptability. I mean, being able to, okay, well, you know, kind of read the situation and then maybe adapt based on what the situation is. But it really comes down to having that passion every day, and just staying to what, you know, what you believe, and staying to what you're passionate about.
Yeah. No, I mean, so it's definitely true. It definitely makes sense. You got to stay with your passion. I like that a lot, for sure. Kind of speaking a little bit to that passion. I mean, after 98, things kind of don't go the way you want. You end up introducing kind of freestyle skiing in a bigger way, I would say, or at least a little bit more on the map, by going down to Australia, getting some work in with Jackie Cooper, Alisa Camplin, and Alisa ended up winning gold in 2002 or 6?
2. Gold, well, double, yeah. She was gold in 2 and bronze in 6, yeah.
Bronze in 6, yeah. So, but I mean, there were a few here and there, but Australian skiing, or freestyle skiing, has definitely not been that. Was never really on the map that much. And it's funny, you know, I just chatted with Matt Graham a couple of weeks ago, you know, 2018 silver medalist, and you had Dale Begg before that, and now it's kind of got its own culture, as you were talking to a little bit earlier, and they're kind of building something. You know, they're trying to catch up, and they've passed a lot of different other countries that have had such success.
Yeah, look, I think, you know, Australia's an amazing sport country, and I think they, in the winter sports side particularly, they punch way above their weight. You know, they've had a pretty phenomenal track record of, you know, particularly Olympic World Championship success there.
Right.
And I think it goes down to, you know, it comes down to a couple of things. I mean, certainly the consistency of the leadership. You know, Jeff Lipshut, who's done an amazing job for decades there now in terms of, you know, kind of spearheading that program, and you know, on the whole winter sports side. But it goes even deeper than that, you know, to the coaching side. And I think, you know, particularly in the mogul side, you know, you get a guy like Steve Desovich, who I think is one of the greatest coaches of all time in any sport. You know, he's consistently produced people, or helped produce people, that have the raw technical skills and learn to come through and produce in those time frames. And so certainly in that realm, you know, they've done a really good job finding great coaches and being able to bring them in with athletes who really want to learn and really want to win. Like that's one of the Australian things, is that audacity to, hey, look, I don't care. I'm going to, I can do this.
Yeah.
And that was one of the, the great things that, was watching the women's aerial program in particular in the early 2000s was, just how driven they were.
Mm-hmm.
And how, Alisa, she was probably one of the ones that had the, most audacious view of what she was going to do and how she was going to do it. It was kind of Bill Johnson-ish, like where you say before, yeah, I'm going to win the Olympics, and kind of that's it. And she was very much like that. But I think that's part of Australia's raw DNA in terms of sports.
Yeah.
Yeah,
definitely.
It's an amazing.
No, it reminds, as you talk to that, I mean, it kind of reminds me of not only the skiing, but the tennis, right? Leighton Hewitt, just kind of that grinder, get to every ball, just, never say, die, and just that attitude of kind of never quitting. And then obviously, as you talk to Desovic, he is an extremely competitive guy. I was
little,
yeah. I was chatting with.
Don't play table tennis with him.
I was chatting with Matt about when I was younger and went to when World Mogul used to be a camp in Whistler Blackcomb, and at that time period, Florida State was a really big college football program at the time, and Desovic was all about Florida State, and I grew up a Florida State fan. And so, we talked about it, and I was little, and I remember seeing him years later at the water ramps in Park City. I think he was training there with Dale and Jerry Grossi. And I'm like, he's wearing an Alabama hat. And I was like, I thought you were a Florida State fan. He's like, they suck now. They haven't won in years. I'm Alabama. Alabama keeps winning all the nationals. It's like, so you're just that? He's like, oh yeah, it's got to be the winner. You got to be winning if you want me to be a fan.
Yeah. He's a bit of a bandwagon jumper, but he's deep down. He's pretty loyal.
He's a winner. He wants to be with the winners. It's hard to blame him. It's good to be winning. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So talking about your career, not only athletically, but coaching, business, all those aspects, like who are some people that really helped mentor you or kind of inspired you and kind of helped you along the way to kind of stokes the passion that you had for the sport and life and everything else?
Yeah. I think that's the great thing is, there are always difference makers in your life and people who kind of reason season lifetime kind of people that kind of come into your life. And I think, I've been very fortunate to have some great mentors, great partners, comrades along the way. And I think, in my case, it's been kind of an eclectic collection of a lot of different people who exhibited, kind of certain things, either when they needed it or things that were core values that helped me understand, what needed to be done or how to do it best or whatever. It goes back to, grade 4 teachers and, track coaches, in your high school years and et cetera, or, people that taught you skiing or whatever. And even today, I get to work with some amazing people, inside of the group of people that we work with. And I've had some exposure to, to some phenomenal people in the sports world, in the pro sports world through, through some of the avenues that I have. And it's not one thing or another. It's not one person or another. I think, for me, it's really been able to draw on all those people and have that eclectic experience of the strengths of the collective strengths of all those people, as opposed to just one, one mentor or one person.
Mm-hmm. No, definitely. You got to take from as many people as you can get. One of the things my dad always talked about was whether it's a coach or a book or something like that, if there's 3 kind of main takeaways you can take away from a book or a coach or something, then it's definitely been fulfilling and definitely worth venturing kind of down that path. for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
So speaking to, a little bit of the skiing world, and let's talk a little bit about Harkin Banks. Can we talk a little bit about Hot Dog the movie? I mean, it is one of the best movies out there that people have probably never seen, right? David Naughton, Patrick Hauser. That came out in '84, right? Was that?
Yeah.
When did they film it? Did they film it that same year? Because you were a world champion in 1984, right? And you were second in the world in
83.
83.
Yeah.
Okay.
Runner up in 81 and 82 and 83. I was World Cup champion, and
okay.
84 it was my my last competitive year, and
last year.
Finished fourth. But the movie was filmed in Squaw in 83, right. Spring of 83. It was supposed to take. I think it was supposed to only take about 5 weeks to film, maybe I might even be less than that. I think 3 weeks. They had originally planned on shooting the kind of on snow pieces.
Yeah.
And then typical, it's kind of squaw spring. The weather was interesting. and it ended up, kind of devolving into about, 6 weeks of filming. But yeah, and it was an amazing experience, and a lot of great people, kind of in the background of that. And there was a lot of people that spun out of that from the freestyle world that went on to do great things in Hollywood. One of my great friends, Frank Bedore, who was who I was second to in 81 and 82. He went on to kind of got the movie bug out of that film, and went on to do amazing things, and went from being an actor to script broker to producer, and executive producer. There's Something About Mary, and
really?
Some other films. Yeah, and still to this day is deeply ingrained in writing, and film projects. And there was Jeff Chumas, who was also kind of engaged in that process, and now is kind of embedded in that world. And Scott Steindorf, he wasn't involved in that, but was involved in deeply involved now in the film industry, and did Lincoln Lawyer, and lots of projects. And Paul Rosenberg, who was Kenji, he went on to produce all kinds of stuff. I think he actually even did some stuff with Eminem, and I think with one of the Superman franchise, or one of the Superman pieces. So yeah, it was pretty interesting to see how that spun into a whole bunch of different things for the freestyle world.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, to your point, it was one of those kind of frozen in time pieces that in one way or another, whether it was interesting or not, definitely put a mark on the board for freestyle.
And so what was that experience like, getting to kind of go through and do those stunts and kind of go through that filming? Because I feel like that's got to be such an interesting, time. Like, all right, how do they direct you when you're going through off an aerial jump? Or is it just like, just do what you need to do and just make sure you land?
Yeah, it was kind of that. And that was the hard part, because, we're dealing with again, the weather situation, and then the snow situation, and it was kind of hurry up and wait, as it always is in the film business, and then all of a sudden it's go, and you're trying to cram in a 15-minute window, because the weather's finally got clear and sunny, and maybe not blowing a gale, that you're trying to cram this these pieces in and try and get stuff in the can. Look, Jeff Chumas was kind of the skiing side, kind of director manager, or kind of operated the skiing equation from the freestyle side, and he was very, he was, as Jeff always is, he's very compassionate, kind of understanding person, and was able to kind of help everybody kind of trying to optimize the athletic view of the thing. I think the other, to the credit of the people who actually had were in control of the project, they took on a lot of what we were trying to convey the sport to be. Mm-hmm. As opposed to what their concept of it was in the mind's eye of the writer at the time. I mean, I think it was an interesting piece. It's when you look back on it as anything in a timepiece, it's there are certain parts of it now you kind of look back and cringe a little bit, a little bit more than a little. But you know, I mean, a lot of that too, you know, that was artistic license. It wasn't necessarily what we were about, and certainly what the sport was about. But that's how you create a movie, right? Like there's an artistic license that goes in that, you know, like that makes things a little more appealing to, you know, to from a movie entertainment standpoint, we'll say.
Yeah. No, absolutely. It was, you know, Harkin Banks is the hero. I remember that blue suit. He goes in and he gets it done. I think, well, one of the funny things for those out there listening, I would say it's probably a little bit more R-rated. So it might have like a G licensing on it, but I would not show it to like a 9-year-old or 10-year-old or something. You know, that was after one of our years of Freestyle International. My parents got it for my brother and I as a Christmas present, and we had to go through and we watched a very censored version, I would say, of that film. I don't think that they knew what to expect out of it. They just knew Hot Dog the movie, and I still have the you got to find the VHS player, but I still have the VHS. You know, it's definitely a classic one for sure.
Yeah.
So. I got a good question on some books. Are there any books you can kind of recommend that have kind of helped you along the way for success, or you just thought are really entertaining, kind of interesting, whether it's, you know, helping toward along those lines of success?
Yeah, I'm going to tell you, and you know, this may be the worst anti-answer you've ever had.
I've had a few so far, so it's fine.
I hate reading. I mean, I'm a voracious news reader.
Okay.
I'm a voracious, you know, like I love reading like fact-based, you know, like news or, you know, stories about, you know, people or things. Yeah. But I'm far more, my draw of information, my draw of understanding of things, or, you know, my knowledge intake is largely just talking to people and reaching people, and or, you know, trying to know people who know people, you know, kind of have those kind of conversations. So very few books, you know, I mean, I've obviously through my athletic career, there was a few that helped me understand certain things and brought things into perspective. And you read snippets of stuff, but it's more news-based for me, or more information, autobiographical based than.
So kind of talking to that a little bit, what helps you kind of retain some of that information? Because I know there's sometimes when having a good conversation or something like that, and you're like, "Ooh, there was that one good like takeaway," and I'm drawing a blank on it. Like, what's kind of helped you be able to retain some of those good?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think in my case, that's one of the things I learned early on, even as a kid in school, is I could either pay attention to the teacher and take what they were saying and assimilate it.
Okay.
And then if I didn't understand it, go back and ask. And if I didn't understand it, go back and ask again. If I didn't understand it, go back and ask again. And I was probably a pain in the ass to some of them, but at the end, the payoff was that I did deeply understand it. As opposed to, I found if I sat and took notes, I wasn't paying attention necessarily to what was being said, and I wasn't assimilating anything that was being said.
Right.
So, you know, and again, if you equate that to the athletic world, you know, you need to hear what the coach is saying. And then you need to be engaged in that interactive process with them to be able to process what's going on. If you're writing notes, you're not doing that, right? Like you're so I think it's really about, you know, kind of active listening and being engaged in that active listening process. And then again, back to that vulnerability, not being afraid to ask stupid questions.
Right.
Ask the question. There is no bad question. If you don't understand it, ask again. If you don't understand it, ask again until you understand it. Keep asking the question. You know, and this is where the onus. If you get a great coach, they're not going to go, "Look, I told you that already." What it means is, I told it to you in the wrong way that you're not getting it, so I need to find another way to tell it to you.
Right. You know? No, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. I always tell. I think that goes into a lot of the communication, right? Because I feel like communication is such a big kind of part of that process, and I tell athletes all the time, I can't fix problems I don't know about. It's the same thing of asking me a question. If I don't know that there's an issue or that you're not understanding, then I'm assuming we're all good and I'm moving on to the next thing.
And that at the highest performance level of an athlete, like when you get to, And this is, one of the things, Olympic Games, that, NBA finals and, any of those like Super Bowls, whatever, those elite things. That's where, communication is, as you just said, it's the most paramount tool, and I say this all the time when we go into games to athletes. You need to communicate with us as your management team, coaches, whatever, team leaders, whatever. Because just as you said, if we don't know, we can't help. Yep. If we know, if we're aware, and part of it's on us of being aware, right. Part of it's also you opening up and speaking and telling, because if what happens in those high pressure situations is almost always in any high pressure situation, communication shuts down.
Yeah.
It's exactly the opposite of what needs to happen. Mm-hmm. Is that it needs to stay open. It doesn't mean it gets erratic. You don't want it all over the shop, right? Because that's another blow up.
Yeah.
But there needs to be those open, that communication has to continue. And as long as that communication continues, then you have total awareness and you have the ability to intervene or to fix things or make sure that things are on the right track. And you have that quietness to be able to, create the platform for performance.
Right. Yeah, no, it definitely allows them to kind of perform their best, right? When everything's open, everything's out on the table, everything you need to know, they know everything. And I mean, I don't know. Do you think there's any way to kind of shorten that? Or is that something that's just built through trust with the athlete or coworker or whatever else? I mean, is there a way to kind of shorten that gap? Because I haven't found one. As much as I've said that, I still don't think they really think I'm being honest and truthful about, hey, I can't fix problems I don't know about, or, hey, you got to communicate. I mean, I feel like it's only kind of built through that trust of, oh, he's actually being genuine or on, like I can ask any question and it might be wrong.
Yeah. Two things, and I'll tell you a quick story, but two things around that. Number one is obviously, there has to be that trust, safe space to be able to have, to say anything. Like, I don't want you there, like in this case, like, don't be there with me. Like, I want you there, but I don't want you there, kind of thing. and that's a hard conversation to have, maybe, to someone that you care a lot about. But at the end of the day, if that's what's going to give you performance in that time, you need to articulate that,
right.
And the other is self-awareness for the coach.
Sure.
Or the athlete. Like you need to be self-aware, because if you're not aware, then it's the same thing, but on yourself. You don't even know, that there's something, and you can't solve it for yourself if you don't even know that it's an issue. I'll give you a quick story about, again, back to Steve Desovich, and we had this situation in Lillehammer. Jean-Luc Brassard had won the semifinals of the Olympic Games, and this is when the great Sergei Shupletov and Edgar Grosperon were were all in the hunt, and it was an amazing kind of battle of the heavyweights, kind of group of people. And so Jean-Luc had won and normally there wasn't a day between, and this in this case the semifinals were a separate day than the finals. So Jean-Luc had a whole day to kind of stew on this, a night to stew on this. But he was pretty cool cucumber, and and kind of knew how to manage himself pretty well. So normally in a World Cup, I was at the bottom and Steve was at the top with the athlete. And at a World Championship Olympic Games, we kind of settled on this, where both of us were at the top, and we would normally have somebody that was at the bottom that would deal with the kind of stuff that went on at the bottom, just so that we could have, kind of a little more focus and take care of more of the details at the top. We got to the top, and it was about 4 or 5 people to go before Jean-Luc, and Jean-Luc had to run last, of course, and, there's all this pressure building. And Des came to me and he said, I can't do this. I can't. I know I'm exuding a nervousness and an energy that might push itself into Jean-Luc, and I don't want to be there. And I said, okay, that's fine, good. I'll go to the gate with him. We'll do everything as normal, and then I'll go to the gate with him.
Yeah.
And Jean-Luc, went to the gate, and obviously he had a phenomenal final run. He became Olympic champion.
Still one of my favorite top 5 for
Yeah.
that, the absorption extension and just the
Yeah.
dynamic skiing. It's
An amazing athlete.
Yeah.
But about a year later, we were at a function, and we never discussed this with Jean-Luc ever. Mm-hmm. About a year later, we were at a function, and Jean-Luc was recounting this experience to this massive room full of people after a golf tournament, and he actually talked about that he felt as he was going into the gate, this kind of screen of protection around him that created this absolute zone of quiet, and that he had nothing that was piercing his awareness, his confidence, and everything. Sure. And it was unbelievably astounding, now knowing the backside of that from both myself and from Steve's side, from a number of standpoints. Number one, that it was actually true for him. It was true for Jean-Luc that bubble was there. But most importantly, I think, and this goes to Steve's selfless kind of thought process and his self-awareness, is that he understood that he was oscillating at that thing and it might have an effect. Sure. And his ego wasn't big enough that he said, I got to go and be in the gate, because I got to be on TV or I got to be whatever. Right. I got to be there. It was like, performance is more important. Whatever's more important for this guy to perform, I'm willing to do. And then adaptability for us to be able to kind of go, okay, we'll make that change. And it all seamlessly just went. So, there's some interesting lessons inside of that in terms of selflessness, in terms of, ego not taking a role, in terms of adaptability, and then ultimately what the outcome can be,
Yeah, no, it's crazy to definitely think that way and have to be that quick kind of on your toes, that day, 4 or 5 skiers out. Mobile skiers runs are only 20-30 seconds, so to be able to think like that quickly is definitely interesting for sure. So would you say there are some kind of unique traits that you have, as you talk about being able to have that self-awareness and stuff like that you've been able to kind of self-identify, that you would say are unique to you, that have kind of helped you along your way? And I think it's profound with definitely, the athlete comes first, right? And that's, is it in the best interest of the athletes? That's something that's so simple, but can get so lost in translation and just kind of thrown to the side. Yeah.
Look, I think, two sides of that thing. One is learned behaviors. Mm-hmm. And one is, kind of who you, what you are. Right. I think a lot of people will tell you that ADHD is a curse. I'll tell you, for me, it's, in many ways, it's been a blessing. Mm-hmm. I think it's given me the ability to think outside the box, to be adaptable, to kind of, run one way, and then if that's not working, to be able to kind of change and switch directions quickly, so I don't get stuck in the mud on certain things. Definitely. Are there negatives? Yeah, for sure. And so, things have had to adapt around that, but I think largely it's been a blessing to be in this world and be able to have that as part of my, DNA and makeup. Everything else, largely, it's as you would say, you're having parents that, allowed you to grow and gave you the opportunity to grow and develop and put you in the environment, to having great, teachers, coaches, mentors, partners, all of those that helped you understand messaging or gave you the freedom to fail, or gave you the opportunity to succeed. They're all part of the learnings along the way. Sure. So, and those end up becoming this eclectic collection of what you represent and how you represent what you think. Right. And so it's never really one thing. There may be pivotal pieces, where you have a profound shift in, but again, it all boils down over time to being this kind of eclectic collection of all the people around you and all the experiences that you've had as you've kind of made your journey through the whole thing.
Right, and grown. And I will say, my parents blame you for most. They definitely blame you for mogul ski dragon. A little 8-year, I was just following my dad You can bring a ski camp? Cool. We all drove up to Mount Hood from Park City, and I was 8 years old. I think I was the youngest in the camp by a pretty good clip.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you turned me into a mogul monster. I know the last day or whatever, they had a ski off where you got to ski against some of the coaches, and I won like 5 or 6 duels. I'm pretty sure I beat Kari Tra. You know, I know I beat Kari. I'm pretty sure I beat Darcy Downs as well.
Yeah.
Now, Kari hadn't won her gold yet. She only had her bronze from 98. You got beat Lasse, Tobin Sutherland, Darcy was taking people down left and right. So, I mean, it was.
Well, and you know, most importantly, you kicked your dad's ass.
That's true.
As your dad, bless his soul, bless his heart, you know, great. He must have been a hell of a wrestler, but he was a horrible mogul skier.
I'm sure I'd love to hear that. Yeah, no, it's definitely definitely true though.
He had the sit back Sally like you could not imagine. It was.
He definitely did. So, any chances of a Freestyle International like comeback? You know, up at Hood. I don't know if is the water ramp in the woods into the. For those out there that don't know, there was in this back woods somewhere by Camp Arawana on the way to Zigzag, some random turnoff. You were in these fields, and it was like this dark, muddy pond with a couple water ramps built on like the back of a truck or something. It was definitely, it would sway if there was a slight breeze or anything like that. And I remember walking through like, okay, this is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was an interesting time because, you know, there was actually a ban on inverted aerials in the United States at the time.
Right.
And there was no water ramps at all in the United States. So, literally, you know, bought a piece of land. We were running the camps, and obviously I wanted to make sure we had a safe environment. Bought a piece of land, had you know, backhoes digging this 100 foot by 100 foot by 10 foot deep pond, and built the ramps, you know, shortly after that, and had kids jumping, you know, that same summer. And you know, that interestingly enough, the property's still there. The ramps are pretty much dilapidated and gone now. Obviously,
are they still there though?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they're overgrown, and you know, they're there and dilapidated. But the funny thing is, you know, we got a few vagrants that kind of made their way onto the property, and my youngest son and I had to go down. Hunter had to go down and vacate them from the property a couple of summers ago.
Okay.
And so we went in and spent 12 hours vacating and burning everything that was you know, had kind of accumulated, and getting rid of everything that had accumulated there, and trying to get it back to its normal overgrown state. But yeah, it's still there. Yeah.
Okay.
Just past Shorty's Corner.
Camp. I think we do a reunion camp. We get the band back together. Darcy, Lasse, Kari. I know you could get some kids. That's for sure up at Hood. The last time I was in Govey, I know government camps come a long way. You know,
and that was a sad thing. So when I had my son there, and we went and we did that, we spent all day, you know, kind of doing that, and then we blazed up the mountain real quick and didn't get there till like 9:30. Didn't have time to stop in Govey. Just went up to the mountain, showed him the snow on the mountain, then blazed down to Jan's place in Hood River, and spent the night there. But yeah, I have not seen Govey since probably 97.
Gotcha. And I think that was probably the year that I was at. Yeah, 98, I think.
Yeah, 96 or 97 was the last time I've kind of spent any time in Govey, and I'd love to go back and spend some time and see what it's, because I always thought it was a great place. I loved Hood. I loved the train, the mountain, the environment there is, you know, is amazing, and to see Govey again would be interesting.
Yeah, no, it's come a long way. They've definitely you know, come a long way. Not too, you know, there's a few more buildings in there. You can still get a Huckleberry Shake.
Yeah.
And they still have plenty of those. But well, thanks for taking the time, Peter. I really appreciate you coming on, and hopefully we'll get to see you in September for the
it's been my pleasure, Bobby. And best regards to your family, and good luck with everything.
Perfect. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good one.